This story takes place in 2007 when I was a 9-year-old kid. I live in Michigan, and it was the summer before I started 3rd grade. It was a tradition for my dad and I to go up north and stay a weekend visiting his buddy who had a cabin on the lake, and this year was no different. I was excited as I always was, but this time I was particularly happy that my dad's wife and her kids weren't going to be with us. The driveway to the cabin was a long dirt road with a smaller cabin and fireplace near the front. It's also surrounded by a thick woods that stretches along both sides of the driveway, which extends about 100 yards until it opens up into the spot where people parked their cars. Just beyond the cars was the bunkhouse, and beyond the bunkhouse was the front yard to the cabin. As we pulled in, my father reminded us that we would have to camp out in the front yard and sleep in a tent together because the bunkhouse was already being occupied by his friends' kids. I didn't mind at all, as the sounds of nature helped me fall asleep. The sun was setting as we unloaded the truck, and the leaves swayed with the breeze. The branches danced and cast shadows along the yard that occasionally changed when the sun dipped behind the clouds. The entire property was surrounded by woods and enclosed within a chain-link fence, with the front yard having a gate that opened up onto the deck. Once you were on the deck, there was a table and grill to your left and a doorway to the cabin on your right. If you kept going, you'd go down 4 steps and come across the hot tub on the left and another doorway on the right, followed by the rickety wooden stairway that led down to the lake. After we said hi to everyone, my dad and I started pitching our tent. I glanced to the right and noticed there was a small clearing about 50 yards out in the woods. I didn't pay much attention to it, and we finished setting up the tent in no time. We then proceeded to join everyone for dinner on the deck, followed by a fire down by the lake. After a few hours of making s'mores, listening to everyone tell ghost stories, and watching some fireworks that were set off on the dock, I found myself exhausted from the trip and started saying goodnight to everyone. I gave my dad a hug goodnight and started heading up to the deck and out to the front yard. I unzipped the tent, crawled into my sleeping bag, and passed out. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I could hear my dad snoring lightly next to me, so I assumed it was well into the night. One thing I picked up on right away was that it was dead quiet outside. Instead of hearing the normal summer sounds that I'm used to hearing at night, there was nothing. There were no crickets chirping, no owls hooting, not even the rustling of the leaves or twigs rustling as the nocturnal creatures came out for food. It was dead silent. I felt extremely uneasy, but I also realized why I had woken up. I had to pee. I slowly crawled to the front of the tent and reached for the zipper, hesitating for a moment before unzipping the door. I poked my head out and was met with the eeriest silence I've ever heard. The moon was full and illuminated the trees and their branches as they sat above me silently. The sky was clear and the stars twinkled as they danced in the darkness. I slowly stepped out of the tent and felt the morning dew from the grass hit the bottom of my feet. I glanced up at the sky, just in awe at how clear it was. We never got to see the stars this bright back in the city, and I liked to cherish the moments when I could. I walked over to the big oak tree that was just inside the fence and started doing my business. I lowered my head to the clearing in front of me, and that's when I heard it. The sound pierced through the silent night. Chills ran down my spine, and I froze in place as my head darted in the direction of the woods, trying to locate the source of the sound. It happened again. This time it was echoed by a few more. What followed were the familiar yips of coyotes, and I was relieved when I saw them emerge from one side of the clearing and exit into the other. I stood there quietly as I observed the canines running and jumping through the clearing. When the last of them had disappeared, I tapped out the last of my business and glanced down to zip up my shorts. When I looked back up, I saw something I will never forget. There, in the clearing 50 yards away, was what looked like a coyote mixed with a human, and it was standing on its hind legs, looking right at me. It had pointy ears, thick, dark fur, a snout that was snarling and revealing a set of wicked teeth, and its eyes were yellow, orange, staring straight into mine. The thing that terrified me most about this thing was its size. If I had to guess, it had to have stood around 8 feet tall. I was frozen stiff, but that quickly changed when the thing looked up and let out the most horrific scream I've ever heard. Nothing about it sounded human. I tripped backwards over my feet and dashed back into the tent, zipping it shut and diving under my sleeping bag. I then heard the grunt of a large animal, followed by the rattling of the chain link fence, and then the unmistakable sound of feet hitting the earth. I closed my eyes shut tight and hoped to God this thing would go away. I laid there, trembling in my sleeping bag as I heard a set of 2 feet slowly stomp around our tent. After a few minutes, I pulled my sleeping bag slightly down below my eyes, and I saw its shadow in front of the tent. Its pointy ears tilted back as it let out another scream, before running towards the driveway of the cabin and disappearing into the night. I laid there in my sleeping bag, paralyzed by fear, hoping it wouldn't come back. After what seemed like forever, the sun finally came up. I asked my dad if he heard the screams last night and told him about what I saw, but he assured me it was just a nightmare and that no such thing existed. I dropped it shortly after and kept this story mostly to myself until now. I don't know what it was for sure that I saw that night, but I did see it. And I do know this: I will never set foot near the Michigan woods alone at night ever again. I served in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. In 1989, I was based in Crossmaglen, not far from St. Patrick's Church. Anyone who knows the area will be aware it's close to the border and surrounded by farmland. We were on a night stag in 2 sangers, which are large observation towers. Around 3 a.m., our radio cackled to life from the other crew in the second tower, asking, "Had we seen the figure on the hilltop to our right?" I looked through an infragreen weapon sight and saw a dark shape squatting next to another shape I initially thought was a tree stump. All 6 of us witnessed this shape and watched it for about 30 minutes, unable to make much out. We radioed it in and were told to observe for a weapon and wait for orders. 20 minutes later, we got a radio contact to say, "Do not engage and do not leave the towers." We were to observe it and nothing else. Our thoughts then were, maybe it's a special forces op. That was, until this thing decided to stand up on 2 legs. It gave a low, rasping growl type noise, which we heard clearly. Then, it got off. You now have 6 Royal Marines wondering what the hell that was and getting our weapons ready to blast whatever it was. When first light broke, we could finally make out that wasn't a large tree stump, but the carcass of a cow that had been ripped open. On our return to base, we were interviewed as to what we witnessed, then told in no uncertain terms, if we mentioned it, our careers would be over. I still don't know what it was, but I do know the locals knew all about it. They called it a werewolf, and that it's been around these parts before any human settlement, and that if you see it, it's best you not engage with it. Just leave it be. I saw what I believe to be a dogman in Charlevoix County in fall of 2011. I was deer hunting in my family's swamp near the Antrim County line. The swamp bordered Lake Michigan on one side and cornfields on the other. I was coming out after dark with only a small flashlight when I noticed some noise coming from a tree line about 50 yards ahead. Now, To put this into perspective, these swamps are highly populated with deer, foxes, coyotes, and plenty of small game. I wasn't spooked by the noise, but when I ran my flashlight across the tree line, I saw a 6 to 7 foot animal on 2 feet running away into the woods. I quickly got back to my truck and got the fuck out of there. I was somewhat shaken up after that. I spent plenty of time looking for tracks the next day, but nothing came of my search. Several weeks later, a spotting was reported in Elk Rapids, around 30 miles away. I've always been fascinated by urban legends and tales of supernatural creatures. I've heard of the Dogman since I was young when I first heard the legend played on the radio. A mysterious creature said to roam the forests of the Great Lakes region, and with my fascination came a sense of wanting to find the creature and to see for myself if it was really out there. Armed with a curious mind and a flashlight, I set out to explore the woods near my hometown. It was an overcast night, with only the dim glow of the stars to guide my path. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. But I pressed on, my curiosity overpowering my unease. Little did I know how much of a mistake it was to ignore my instincts. After what felt like hours of wandering, I stumbled forward. An eerie silence blanketed the forest, as if a switch was flipped and all the sound in the world disappeared. Something drew me toward it, an invisible force urging me to step closer. That's when I surveyed my surroundings in detail and saw it. A pair of glowing amber eyes staring back at me from the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as the creature revealed itself. A massive canine-like figure standing upright on 2 legs. Its fur was matted and dark, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. It was a Dogman, and it had fixed its gaze upon me. A primal fear surged through my veins, and I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight in the process. And with but a moment's hesitation, I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The sound of heavy footsteps pounded behind me, growing louder and closer with each passing second. I could hear its snarls and the sharp snapping of its jaws, hungry for the chase. My breath grew ragged and my muscles screamed in protest, but the adrenaline fueled my desperate sprint. Branches whipped against my face, and the forest floor seemed to rise up to trip me. But I pushed through, determined to escape the clutches of the monstrous Dogman. My lungs burned, and my vision blurred as I reached the edge of the woods. My house stood just a few yards away, its lights providing a beacon of hope. Summoning the last reserves of my strength, I sprinted across the yard and flung open the front door. I slammed it shut, panting heavily as I leaned against it, my heart racing in my chest. I felt a mixture of relief and terror as I looked through the window and saw the Dogman standing at the edge of the clearing, its gaze fixed upon me. Its mouth curled into a wicked snarl, revealing sharp, glistening teeth in what looked like a cruel and deranged smile. For a moment, we locked eyes, a battle of wills between human and beast. I knew that I had escaped, but the encounter had left an indelible mark on my soul. The Dogman had shown me the darkness, lurking just beyond the realm of our understanding, and it was a sight I would never forget. To this day, I am plagued by the memory of that night. The image of the Dogman's glowing eyes and sinister grin haunts my dreams, a constant reminder of the terrors that exist in the shadows. I warn anyone who dares to venture into the Michigan wilderness, beware the Dogman's domain. It may be an urban legend to some, but for those who have encountered its malevolence, it is all too real. The forest hides its secrets well, and the Dogman waits patiently for its next victim. Ever since then, I haven't been able to look at the woods without a shudder going down my spine, hoping to not see the amber eyes staring back at me. If I were to give you all any advice, it would be, do not go out at night. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.